What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, this one is basically just going to be a recap of the Chris Ballard press conference that we saw from earlier today. I didn't end up getting to actually watch it live, was at work and was unable to be on my phone during that time. But I know Cody also had a live reaction to it. We didn't stream it actually live, but he did do a live stream recording his reaction to the presser. So if you guys haven't checked that out, I highly encourage you to go check it out. But I rewatched the presser twice actually and went back to try to get some notes and a couple different things here to try to break down everything that I felt was important in all of this. I'm not covering every aspect of this presser. Not going to do that. It was a 40-minute presser. It's still live out there on everywhere else. So if you guys want to go rewatch the whole thing, I encourage you to go do that. Or even on our channel, we stream that live, so you can go do that. But I just wanted to talk about a few specific points that were brought up that I thought are very important. Ballard started with this. It was the first thing that he said was that I failed. I failed a lot of people. And, that was something that, everyone knows it and he knows it as well. And he comes out and he accepts it. And I think it was very important because, especially throughout the whole presser, when talking about, a lot of the things that were very discouraging about this team and how it performed this year, Ballard did not shy away from it, stated that, it does fall on his shoulders. He stated that he was disappointed and where the team was at now, and said that ultimately it falls on his shoulders, with how the coaching went down, with how the players went down from a personnel standpoint, all of these things. Ballard took responsibility, took accountability for the bad things that were happening. I felt that, again, he did a good job of embracing it. We've said, and we'll kind of get back into a little bit of what Ballard's like later in this video, but he talked about the criticism and the doubt amongst the fan base and everything else and how it's warranted. There's been a lot of times where, Ballard has come off, cocky, very cocky at times, stubborn, which I'm going to get to at some point later on in the video. And sometimes it almost is a little bit of arrogance. And, at times you need to be that way. When you're in a situation, sometimes you need to be that way in order to, come across as if you know what you're doing. And, there wasn't arrogance and cockiness and things of that nature in this presser. He realized that a lot of the things that went wrong with this team fall on his shoulders. It felt like a different Chris Ballard than what we had seen basically over the last 6 or 7 months. We've seen a very different Chris Ballard. So it did feel good to see, that he mentioned this and took accountability for it. But as we know, actions are going to speak louder than words, right? So how he responds to those words, like how does he go into this offseason? How does he attack this? How does he change it, right? That's what the important thing is for this going forward. One of the first things, and for this list, guys, this wasn't all in order. Just a few things that popped up in my head and I was trying to talk about it at random. So, nothing too crazy here, but the first thing that they did talk about with Chris Ballard was the fact that you were talking about, like, what were some of the mistakes that you made, Ballard? Like, what was some of the mistakes with this team? And he mentioned, the instability at quarterback, the going on with, several different quarterbacks, right? Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, after Andrew Luck had been gone, he said that has just not worked for them. And it's been a rift in the team. Mentioned that, the offensive line was a big issue with it going forward. And he's definitely right that the offensive line was a big issue early on, and the quarterback being the quarterback carousel movement that has been happening with this team has certainly made it difficult for this offense to get into a kind of rhythm that they want to be in. And then the big topic, right? Everybody wanted to know, like, hey, they asked him, what is it about the quarterback, right? What are you going to do with the quarterback? They asked him several times, what about that fourth pick and what Ballard might do, what he thinks of the quarterbacks, all of these things. And somebody asked him, like, if the quarterback that you want is there at number 1, would you trade the heavens to go and get him? And it was weird because it was very quick, very very emphasized by Ballard that he said, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. We know that Ballard has not been a guy to trade up, and we know he's not been a guy to trade up and go and get a quarterback for a bunch of different reasons. But this is the kind of thing where I think he understands, and we mentioned this before. We talked about how with him and Jim Irsay, it may be at a point where Irsay has told him, hey, like, this is your last shot here. I don't want to keep going back into this problem every year with the quarterback. So it's time to go and get the future, right? But he also did stop to mention the right quarterback, right? It's the same thing that we hear from Ballard every year, right? It's not about just getting a guy. It's about getting the guy. That's the emphasis that Ballard is still sticking to, that, I can go and get a quarterback in this year's draft, but if I don't get the right one, then you guys will come back after me and say, why did you trade for that guy? Right. So he understands that it is a moment where they need to find that quarterback, but they also need to make sure that they find the right guy, because they can't just get any guy, because it's just not going to work out if they just get any guy. They want to find the guy, right? He also declined to answer if Matt Ryan would remain on the roster. He said he talked with Matt Ryan yesterday, talked with him a little bit about what's going on, but didn't answer to say that he knows Matt Ryan's going to be on the roster. And we've talked about this for many, many off seasons, how, the attitude changes with how they approach things. They wanted Phillip Rivers back, but Carson Wentz, they did not vouch for him. Matt Ryan, they're not vouching for him right now. Saying good things about him, but are not wanting to say that they want him. And I'm probably going to make a video at some point saying why the Colts should get rid of him. And I'll save that for another video, but again, he mentioned how, and I'll mention this at another time, but and the next thing that he talked about after, some of the mistakes that were made about the quarterback situation over the last year or so, he talked about the offensive line. And, Ballard really came into this, and he gave a great answer as to anyone that's not blinded with hate would understand where Ballard's coming from with this, is that he thought the continuity with the O-line would be better than what it was. He thought that the same thing that a lot of Colts fans, including myself, thought this at the beginning of the last year, where he mentioned, we had 3 solid guys in Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly, and Quentin Nelson, right? 3 really good guys on that roster. And he thought that even if he had to replace a couple of those guys, he felt that the guys he currently had on the roster, he felt that with those 3, they would be able to gel a little better. They'd be able to absorb a few things about the knowledge and be able to pick up their play and, be able to just work better within the unit, because 60% of the offensive line was put together very well already. And it clearly did not work that way. Obviously not until the end of the season, when the Indianapolis Colts offensive line was actually starting to play relatively well. But he owned up to it. He said that, listen, it was, it was bad decision making on my part. I messed up. I thought it would be better. It just didn't turn out to be that way. And I can totally get that. He said that he's going to continue to be the motto of build in the trenches. And I absolutely agree. You need to continue to do that. You need to keep building there, because if you don't, then, it's going to be very interesting. But he did mention about Bernard Ryman and how impressed he was with how Bernard has handled this season. And he thinks that he can make things go better. One thing I really liked hearing Ballard mention was he talked about the turnover ratio this year for the Colts and how, they were dead last in red zone percentage offensively. And he talked about it. We kind of ask the coaches a little bit about this every year, or we keep bringing it up, how the Colts just under Frank Reichs, especially, just never seemed to be good in the red zone. And how when it came to turnovers and things, especially this year, I mean, the Colts were minus 13 in turnover ratio, and they were the worst team in the NFL at red zone percentage. So, for Ballard to understand this and to figure this out, and knowing that's what a new coach is going to have to figure out, that's great to hear from the aspect that, he understands what the weaknesses are with this team, turning the ball over and, not being effective in the red zone. We need to find somebody that can make it do better in those categories and keeping those guys from to do better. Right. Went on to say that, the number one thing right now is finding the right head coach. Guys were talking about, what is this? What is this? What's your approach on this? Well, the number one thing right now that is on everyone's mind is trying to get the right head coach in the building. And that's what's the main priority right now. Did mention that Saturday will be a candidate. Again, it's a candidate. It's not the fact that he's going to be prioritized over anyone, but he's a candidate right now. And a couple other things, talked about how Irsay lets me do my job. That's the big one. Talked about how, they have great discussions and that he loves working for Jim Irsay, and that Irsay allows me to do my job, which I think is a good thing. I'm glad that, we've been talking about it over the last, basically the half the season, that, Irsay has been, seems to be the one taking over on everything. And I'm sure that's been eating away at Ballard for a while. So I'm sure he's glad to address it. Again, just sounds like a really good explanation there. Then talking about some of the other things that went wrong this season, he just said, we are not good enough. And that players need to start playing to standard, and that, he needs to do a better job. It's a different mindset, it feels like, for Chris Ballard, right? Where he said multiple times over the last several years that, guys are playing really well, and that, these certain groups don't need help, even though we say that they do. And, it felt like a different mindset from Ballard, understanding that things are not good. Right. Things are not good anymore, Ballard. Like, things are not good. You're going the wrong direction. And I think he fully understands that. And that's what's great about it. A couple other quotes. He talked about, I have to do my job better. I have to grow. I've been stubborn for a lot of time, and that's, been something I need to work on. It's great to hear him mention these things, because, again, like I said, the personality of Ballard has never been to, tell people. He may say it, but he's not going to acknowledge that it's a problem. But now he is saying, like, I need to do my job better. I need to do a better job of making this team better. And, he talked about the hiring of Jeff Saturday in the midseason and what kind of role he had in that. He actually mentioned how he voiced his concern about bringing Saturday in, because of the fact that, not because he despised who he was hiring, but the fact that the team was fragmented at that time. The team was not looking good, and Saturday was coming into a situation where there's going to be a lot of problems. And he said, I'm going to make sure that we can try to get him in the best situation possible. But it clearly just didn't work out for a lot of different reasons. But he said that, I felt bad to put Saturday in that situation. And that again falls on his shoulders. One thing I did notice, and I kept talking about, right, how things are going to change, right? And how there seems to be a different mindset with Ballard and how he may approach this offseason because things are, not as good as what he might think it is now. And he said that, he has said things about the quarterback and how, he would do a lot to make sure that he gets the right quarterback in here. And it feels like there's just a different Ballard, right? Like knowing the circumstances. But he also mentioned and growth and how they do things, but he also sounded like he wouldn't change his aggression or his approach to how he does things in free agency. He was asked about, how a lot of people call him conservative and how he approaches free agency and whatnot, right? And he went into detail of talking about how, I don't know if that's true very much because, we traded for Buckner, we traded for Wentz, and we traded for Ryan. Now, those may not have been, they may not have worked out. Some of them may not have worked out, but they still are things that he's done. And, he talks about trading for Yannick and signing Stephon and a couple other things. I do think he has a little bit of a point. I do think he has become a little bit more aggressive recently, especially. But again, the aggression that he has, put into certain positions or into players at certain positions and they've not worked out is something that's a little bit concerning. And you question on whether or not he's going to change his approach to how he handles those situations. I still have my doubts, but we'll see. It's the first thing that needs to happen is getting the right head coach of the building. And we'll see what Ballard and Irsay end up doing with that decision. One of the last few things right here that I'll mention, Ballard said no other place than Indy that he would rather be right now. And he says, I want to make it right for Indy. Given the circumstances of where they are now, he says, we've earned the spot that we're at. And as much as I don't like that, that's where we're at. And he says, I want to make it right for Indy to try to make things better. And I can appreciate it. And he mentions how there will be change. Several times kept talking about changes, new things coming to this organization. So we'll see what that entails, but that's going to do it for this video, guys. That was a couple of the talking points, some of the bigger talking points about this group of guys and what Ballard said is going to happen through the offseason and how in his recap of the season in general. Again, I would encourage you guys to go and watch Cody's presser, the reaction to the presser earlier today, if you want to get a recap on that. And again, if you want to watch it just for yourself, you can watch it on, anywhere the Colts social medias are. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on Ballard's presser and what your thoughts were on this. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.